15-year-old Calvin didn't mean to become a hero, especially not in cargo shorts and with a nosebleed. His family's supply ship took a hit from a rogue asteroid cluster, rerouting him straight into a restricted Valari orbit. One moment he was watching outdated training vids, the next, he was in a smoking emergency pod spiraling down onto a violet jungle moon. He stumbled out, knees shaking, clutching a half-burnt multitool that barely passed for a weapon. Then he heard the scream, high-pitched, almost melodic. He followed the sound and found her. HFY Lara. Glowing, cornered, dressed in shimmering armor far too elegant for someone bleeding from the shoulder. Two bounty hunters closed in, armed with shock spears and teeth that clicked in a rhythm that spelled bad news. Calvin didn't think. He acted. Threw the multitool. Missed entirely. Then charged like a lunatic. One hunter laughed. That was before Calvin triggered the rescue beacon and jammed a broken beacon shard into his gut. Pure panic. Dumb luck. Blood everywhere, none of it his. HFY Lara collapsed. Calvin caught her. Stay awake, he said, voice cracking. She whispered something in Valari. Then collapsed again. He didn't know alien first aid, so he went with what he knew, CPR. Except she wasn't breathing through her mouth. He pressed their foreheads together, hoping for some kind of response. Something sparked. Her eyes flew open. Wide. Dilated. Glowing. It worked. Or maybe it meant something else entirely. Moments later, the emergency med drone arrived. He was half unconscious, still face pressed to hers when they beamed him out. A translator drone whispered in his ear as everything went dark. You have initiated a sacred Valari bond. Back on the ship, he asked his mom what that meant. She shrugged. Probably just cultural weirdness. You saved a girl. Be proud. But he couldn't forget her. The glow in her eyes. The way she looked at him before he passed out. And the last thing she whispered in English, just barely audible. Return when your form has completed. I owe you more than life. For years he thought about that line. Did she mean maturity? Muscles? A job? He got all three, just in case. By 20, Calvin was fit, confident enough to talk to girls without hyperventilating, and inexplicably popular among xenobiology majors. But still haunted by that moment. That weird, burning connection. That whisper. So, when he found a sealed message pod floating in Sol orbit, coded in Valari script and carrying his name, he didn't hesitate. Invitation to fulfill Convergence Pact. One-time authorization for planetary entry granted. Please arrive biologically complete. He didn't even question the phrasing. Just packed a bag, combed his hair, and told his boss he'd be out for interstellar business. Important stuff. The flight was uneventful. The landing, a little more ceremonial than expected. Dozens of Valari lined the starport corridor. Banners. Flutes. One guy sprinkled glittery powder on Calvin's head and whispered, Prime donor. Calvin had questions. But they had answers. Too many. Too fast. Something about ancient rites. Fertility convergence. Honor bond repayment. His CPR counted as pre-union stimulation. Apparently. Forehead contact was, in Valari culture, the first and most sacred act in bonding. He nearly passed out again. Then she entered. HFY Lara. Taller, sharper, stunning, and still glowing in places human girls just didn't. She smiled, tilting her head. You returned. Your form has certainly completed. He muttered something about push-ups. She chuckled, then leaned close. Are you ready for the next step? He nodded, mostly because his throat stopped working. But deep down, he knew he wasn't. Calvin was immediately ushered through corridors that smelled like ozone and jasmine, barely able to keep up as a procession of attendants in she robes whispered reverently behind him. Every corner of the palace hummed with an energy he couldn't explain. He asked one of them if he was in trouble. The reply: only if you're unwilling to fulfill what your body has become. He didn't like the sound of that. Within the hour, He was standing before a circular council, flanked by XY Lara on one side and a very old, very serious-looking alien woman on the other. XY Lara looked calm. Amused even. He, on the other hand, was sweating in places he didn't know he had glands. A translator drone buzzed, then politely informed him that the council had unanimously voted for the ritual of reconnection to commence. Effective immediately. They gave him a silk sash, told him it was symbolic. Of what, they wouldn't say. He finally got to speak to XY Lara in private. She greeted him with a long look up and down, smiled slowly, and said, "You've filled out well. The council approves. Especially the matron. She said you have integrity, strong core, functional symmetry." Calvin blinked. "I think those are all just polite ways to say I hit the gym." XY Lara stepped closer. "You don't understand. In Valari culture, compatibility isn't measured in just strength or looks. It's resonance, biology, emotional frequency. You stirred mine once before. Now we see if your form truly sings." He opened his mouth to ask what singing entailed, but was immediately escorted away to prepare for what they called the pre-fusion examination. Preparation involved stripping, scanning, and answering questions that might have passed as medical or psychological if they hadn't sounded like weird dating profiles. "Do you consider yourself emotionally penetrable? Are your emissions forceful? How frequently do you initiate bonding rituals?" Calvin answered everything with the awkward charm of a guy who'd watched too many holos but had never actually done anything real. The AI medical officer evaluating him scribbled down, "Ample enthusiasm. Inexperience offset by eagerness to engage." Afterward, he was presented with a drink called phase water, allegedly to calibrate his endocrine rhythm. It tasted like alien mouthwash and regret. He choked halfway through it and asked, "Is this necessary?" A Valari nurse replied, "It stimulates your ancestral potential. Your body must remember why it touched her before it was ready." Calvin's brain short-circuited trying to unpack that. The next meeting was with the matron herself, XY Lara's mother, the grand arbiter of tradition and also, apparently, a professional at making young men sweat bullets. She examined Calvin with a stare that could flatten stars. "My daughter thinks highly of you," she began. "But so do our genetic scanners. That's rare. Dangerous. You must answer with precision now, for there is no turning back." Calvin nodded. "Ask me anything." She did. "How would you handle successive cycles of high-pressure bonding? I hydrate well? What does lasting impression mean to you? More than 5 minutes?" She narrowed her eyes. "You understand that repeated exposure to her aura may induce biological urgency?" Calvin hesitated. "Is that like being hot for her? Because that ship has already launched." A pause. Then a small, approving smile. "Honest. Unrefined. But potent." The matron concluded the evaluation with a ritual phrase. "Your form has promise. Let the right unfold." XY Lara met him outside the chamber and whispered, "You survived her. I'm impressed. Not many males get past her second question without collapsing in shame. I blacked out halfway through. I think I said something about bananas. She'll love that." Back in his temporary quarters, Calvin tried to process everything. His head buzzed. His body hummed. He wasn't sure if it was the phase water, XY Lara's presence, or the deep-rooted knowledge that he was now part of something so strange, so sacred, that even his most embarrassing teenage moment, smashing his forehead into hers, was now considered a cosmic turning point. He checked the mirror. He didn't look different. But something had changed. Inside. Some switch flipped. Maybe it was the knowledge that this wasn't just about honor, or tradition, or even XY Lara's smile. This was about fulfilling something he accidentally started. And now there was no turning back. The ritual of readiness began with zero ceremony and maximum confusion. Calvin was led into a chamber called the Chamber of Enduring Echo, which sounded poetic until the doors sealed behind him and the lights dimmed. A soothing voice explained this was a compatibility simulation, meant to evoke ancestral instincts and provoke hormonal resonance. It started with glowing glyphs pulsing across the walls. Then came scent bursts. Lavender. Metal. Something suspiciously like cinnamon toast. He sneezed. Next came the flexibility assessment. A platform rotated beneath him as robotic arms gently manipulated his limbs, checking range, endurance, and muscle tension. He tried to crack a joke about needing dinner first. The AI replied, "Nutritional stimulation post-testing is permitted, if you retain motor function." The final stage of the trial involved direct exposure to XY Lara's aura field. She stood a few paces away, saying nothing, just watching. A low hum filled the room. The walls shifted colors. His heart pounded. The Valari called it phase alignment. Calvin called it the most confusing boner of his life. He passed. Barely. Then came the interview of Unity. It was less an interview and more a performance review conducted by the most intimidating alien panel imaginable. Valari elders, scholars, and even some AI avatars of past matriarchs floated around him, asking questions with deliberately vague phrasing designed to test intent, humility, and output capacity. What volume of bonding engagement can you sustain across cycles? I mean, I've jogged for 20 minutes before collapsing, if that helps. How do you handle dual nervous system pairings? With patience? And maybe herbal tea? Have your previous fusions resulted in successful legacy formation? Define fusion? Despite his confusion, his sincerity broke through. One elder nodded thoughtfully and murmured, "Naive. But ripe." XY Lara was asked to weigh in. She said, "His presence agitates my field positively. He breathes incorrectly, but it pleases me." Calvin looked around. "I think that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my breathing." Finally, the matron stood. She spoke the words that confirmed the decision. "Let convergence proceed. This human has demonstrated endurance, instinctual alignment, and surprising fertility markers." Calvin raised a hand. "I'm still confused. Is this like marriage, or more like breeding license?" The matron simply smiled. "Yes." A crowd of Valari gathered to witness the ceremonial acknowledgement. Calvin was handed the mark of binding, a small pendant pulsing with both his and XY Lara's biometric signatures. It was placed against his chest, seared gently into the skin. It tingled. Possibly for life. The ritual ended with what they called sensory synchronization. He and XY Lara stood alone, palms nearly touching, sharing breath, watching as their vitals matched in rhythm on hovering displays. He expected fireworks. Instead, it was quiet. Powerful. Real. She whispered, "You're not just a human. You're the anomaly." He grinned. "That sounds like the start of a really weird pickup line." "It is," she said. "And it's working." The Valari elders declared the rite successful. But before Calvin could breathe easy, an alert echoed through the hall: unauthorized approach. A rival bloodline had arrived, demanding contest for the human asset. Turns out, Valari law permitted assertion challenges if another house could prove higher resonance compatibility. Which, in this case, meant someone else wanted to steal Calvin. He stepped forward, refusing to hide. "Do I get a say in this?" The challenger, taller and glittering with excess pheromones, smirked. "You're a genetic resource. You're transferable." Calvin crossed his arms. "I'm also a guy with a smart mouth and access to Earth memes. You sure you want this smoke?" The council hesitated. A matron whispered, "He is already interfused with the Prime's aura. To remove him may rupture the field. Plus," Calvin added, "I'm very attached to my current partner. Spiritually and also, you know, physically." XY Lara stepped beside him, eyes blazing. "He returned for me. He touched my braith before he even knew what it meant. His ignorance is sacred." No one argued with that. Not even the challenger. The council upheld the bond. The challenger backed off, muttering about dangerously loyal specimens. Calvin turned to XY Lara. So, that was a thing. She nodded. Yes. And now you're mine. He paused. In the legal way, right? For now, she whispered. Until the next right. That one's private. Calvin had no idea what he was getting into. Every moment since arriving on Valari had been a whirlwind of rituals, tests, and near-constant confusion. Yet somehow, everything about this strange world was starting to make sense, if only in the way a puzzle comes together just before you throw it across the room in frustration. The final ritual, the one that would bind him to XY Lara in the eyes of her people, was about to begin. The tension in the air felt thick enough to choke him. Despite the formalities and the grandeur of everything around him, all Calvin could think about was one thing: getting this over with. XY Lara was standing beside him, her posture tall and regal as always. She hadn't said much since the challenge. Her earlier confidence had been replaced with a quiet intensity. Calvin could feel it, a sharp, steady energy radiating from her. It was clear now that she wasn't just playing at this, she was committed. And that meant something very different on Valari. So this is it, huh? Calvin said, trying to lighten the mood, though his own nerves were tightening around his chest like a vice. XY Lara turned to him, her lips curling into a faint smile. You're nervous? Me? Nervous? He chuckled, but it was hollow. Just waiting for the next test where I have to prove I'm genetically compatible, or something. She raised an eyebrow. This isn't a test. This is the convergence. It's a merging of spirits, blood, and essence. You'll find it different. Different? He asked, his heart rate picking up again. How? The ritual is for more than just us, she explained. It's to prove our worth as partners, not just to each other, but to our people, to our legacy. We're binding everything we are, everything we ever will be. Great. So now he was a legacy. Calvin had never even had a plant to take care of before. The chamber they entered was quiet, almost sacred. A deep hum filled the space, vibrating through the floor and into Calvin's bones. This was it. No more games. No more questioning whether he was ready. In a way, he was already too deep in this mess to turn back. The ceremony began with a series of exchanges. Exchanges Calvin couldn't quite follow, at least not fully. Words were said. His hands were held. His heart pounded in his chest like an old engine ready to burst. All around him, the council, the matriarchs, even the rival families, everyone was watching. His mind kept flashing to the earlier tests, the strange questions, the overwhelming weight of tradition. Then, XY Lara moved closer to him. Her presence flooded his senses, and everything inside of him seemed to hum in perfect harmony with hers. It wasn't just chemistry. It was something deeper, something primal. Her breath, the way she looked at him, it wasn't just her gaze. It was as if she was looking into him, seeing every part of him that he had yet to recognize. He could feel her intentions, her thoughts, swirling around him. There was a deep connection forming between them, not just physical, but spiritual. It wasn't something he could explain, but it was real, undeniable. Her voice, soft and steady, broke through his spiraling thoughts. Are you ready for this? Do I have a choice? He tried to joke, but the reality of what was happening finally hit him. You've already made the choice, she replied. You came here. You accepted everything. And now you are here. With me. The words felt like an anchor, grounding him to the present. No more second-guessing. No more uncertainty. This was happening. And there was no escape from it. The council moved around them, but they weren't really there. It was just him and XY Lara in that moment, two beings on the brink of something far beyond their control. This was their fate now. This was their future, bound together not just by duty or custom, but by something much more. He stepped forward, a single step that felt like the most important movement of his life. Their hands found each other again, their palms aligning perfectly. The tingling, the warmth, it all deepened. Their hearts beat in synchrony, a pulse shared between them, connecting them in a way he couldn't begin to understand. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," he replied, his breath catching. "I do." The ceremony continued, but Calvin wasn't focused on the motions anymore. He wasn't thinking about the spectators, the laws, or the future. All that mattered in that moment was XY Lara. The connection between them was raw, untamed, but perfect. It felt like nothing could tear them apart, not now, not ever. When it was finally over, when the final echo of the ritual faded into the silence of the chamber, Calvin found himself staring at XY Lara, breathless. She had become more than just an alien noble to him. She was his partner. His counterpart. And somehow, in the most inexplicable way, he knew he had found his place, here, with her. As the council made their final declarations, all Calvin could think about was what came next. The rest of the galaxy? Let it watch. He had everything he needed right here. And with XY Lara by his side, there was nothing left to fear. Her hand in his felt like the only thing that mattered. No more uncertainty. No more second-guessing. This was it. And in the end, Calvin was finally at peace with that.